An experienced nurse who has devoted years to working with the dying in places where medicine is already powerless, unexpectedly revealed mysteries that shocked the whole world and made even skeptics think. She's been silent for a long time, but people need to know the truth. One's own death or the loss of loved ones is always hard and scary. The revelations of Hadley Vlahos have helped thousands of people to look at the issue of life and death from a different angle. One day she said, "Why do we avoid talking about death? We think it's because, unlike other problems where we can search for a solution, death is inevitable. No one wants to erase themselves from life, so death evokes fear. On a subconscious level, we avoid thinking about it. But that only makes things worse. When we lack information about what really happens, our brain fills in the gaps, and we start fearing something that isn't actually worth fearing." Visions at the end of life. Proof of the existence of an afterlife? Do you want to know if there is an afterlife? Let's listen to what Hadley says. For her, the main evidence of the existence of another world beyond the threshold of death are visions of dying people. Before joining the hospice, Hadley did not believe in an afterlife, and now she hears almost daily from her charges that they are visited by deceased friends and relatives. Hadley has cared for thousands of patients during her work, and many people talked about visits from their deceased loved ones before they died. These cases instilled in the nurse a firm belief that these incredible phenomena are not nonsense, but a real reality. The patients talk about it very calmly, they just talk about what they see. For example, they might say,
"My dead sister is standing by the bed. My dead husband is looking down at us."
They see them the same way they see their living relatives or staff. This is not a near-death experience, but a kind meeting with loved ones. Early in her career, Hadley asked herself the question, is there an afterlife, or does everything turn black when you die? Now she knows for sure the answer to this question. There is an afterlife, and the stories she sees with her own eyes every day helped her to make sure of this. The first patient Hadley had to take care of was a woman in her 70s with bone cancer. She didn't seem to worry at all about her diagnosis and fully accepted her fate. One day, while on duty, a nurse was sitting next to the bed and working on a computer. The patient turned to her and said,
"My sister is sitting in the chair next to you."
It sounded so natural that Hadley turned to look at their guest, but there was no one else in the room. Then, the patient explained that her sister had died 20 years ago. The patient asked not to tell her family about it because she was afraid they would think she was going crazy. And then she said,
"I think I'm going to die soon."
Hadley tried to convince the woman that she had no signs of imminent death. Her blood pressure and heartbeat were normal. But when she came on shift a day later, she found out that the patient had indeed died. Her death was peaceful. And here is the story of another woman which Hadley will always remember. At first, she visited the patient twice a week at her home for 6 months. The woman was 98 years old, and she was ready to face death. Her husband died in a car accident. All her friends had already left, and she had no children. She was an ardent Catholic and dreamed of meeting God. Despite her advanced age, the woman felt good. But one day, during a nurse's visit, a woman had an attack of chronic bronchitis, in which breathing becomes extremely difficult. Hadley helped stop the seizure, but after that, the patient's health began to deteriorate rapidly. And after a couple of weeks, she agreed to move to a hospice. The woman slept a lot and woke up only for a few hours a day. During Hadley's next shift, the patient suddenly woke up and confidently said,
"I'm going to die tonight. I'm not afraid. My husband came to pick me up. He's watching us. He said my time has come."
Hadley's shift ended, and she went home, saying goodbye to the patient. The nurse was sure that the patient still had a little more time to live in this world. But at 3 a.m., Hadley suddenly woke up with the feeling that her ward had gone to another world. The next morning, a nurse from the night shift confirmed that the patient had died around 3 o'clock in the morning, and everything went very calmly. Hadley's patient was dying of cancer. Miss Cheryl was not yet an old woman, but the disease had completely depleted her body. A nurse with a tablet was sitting next to the sleeping patient's bed, filling out a work schedule. Suddenly, Cheryl opened her eyes, sat up in bed, and asked,
"Have you seen butterflies too? My son just brought me a box with the most beautiful butterflies in it."
The nurse calmed the patient down and put her back down. When the patient fell asleep again, the nurse went out into the hallway and met Cheryl's husband there. With tears in his eyes, he explained that she had indeed received a box of live butterflies from her son for his birthday. It happened many years ago, a week before the tragic death of the boy. Skeptics who try to explain these visions are considering several possibilities that these visits are not evidence of the existence of the afterlife. Religious beliefs. Patients say that they see dead loved ones because their brains have been trained to do so. They were programmed to believe that. Hadley is convinced that this is not the case. She took care of many atheists who saw their deceased loved ones in the same way before they died. It starts a week or 2 days before death, and visitors from another world come to comfort them and take them on their last journey. Powerful medicines. Hospice doctors do not see any connection between taking medications and near-death visions. With severe incurable diseases, patients have been taking medications for years, but they don't see anything like this until the last days of their lives. Lack of oxygen interferes with the normal functioning of the brain. Supposedly, this is enough to cause hallucinations. However, Hadley knows for sure that there is no relationship between these phenomena because she constantly measures the oxygen level in the body of patients. Hadley emphasizes that she used to be skeptical and did not believe in an afterlife. But since she sees it over and over again in different people, she has come to believe that the afterlife really exists. It gives her peace and tranquility. There is no need to be afraid of death. Our most beloved people are waiting for us beyond the last line. From skeptic to believer is the story of a hospice nurse. I would like to say a few words about Hadley herself before we return to even more fascinating stories from her practice. How did it happen that an atheist suddenly began to believe in life after death? Hadley was born in 1992 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the daughter of a funeral home owner and an embalmer. Since childhood, death had not been a taboo topic for her, and religious education in the spirit of Catholicism strengthened her confidence in the afterlife. She was sure that we would all go to the afterlife. That's exactly what the Bible says. However, at the age of 15, her faith was shaken. Before her eyes, Taylor's friend died in a fight, who died instantly from a ruptured liver. The shock and loss made her doubt divine mercy, and she turned away from religion, becoming a staunch atheist. In her youth, Hadley dreamed of becoming a children's writer and enrolled in the Faculty of Philology at the University of Florida. But life made its own adjustments. After the unexpected breakup of the engagement, her fiancé soon married someone else, and Hadley herself gave birth to a son a few months later. Then she realized that writing would not feed her family. In New Orleans, Hadley enrolled in a nursing course. After receiving her diploma, her medical career began in a regular clinic. There she encountered many cases of ill treatment of patients. She was able to work there for several months because it was hard for her to be there. Having accidentally landed a part-time job at a hospice, Hadley was struck by the warm family atmosphere that prevailed there, and she gladly accepted the offer of a permanent job in this place. And now, back to the main topic of the video. Dying patients talk to their deceased loved ones. People experience the same thing, regardless of their religion, race, or social status. Miss Susan, who was told that her illness was incurable, was painfully afraid of death. She harassed the staff with her tantrums. But one day, waking up in the morning, she announced that her late husband had come to her and told her about life after death. He said he was waiting for her there and would soon take her to a better world forever. After that, the patient's fear disappeared. Miss Edith suffered from severe dementia. Surprisingly, the manifestations of mental illness disappeared completely at the end of life. This happened after her late mother came to the patient and convinced her that everything would be fine from now on. The patient began to communicate with visitors and even learned to predict the future. Hadley was constantly witnessing such cases, but she couldn't figure out what to call what was happening. It just didn't fit with atheism. Dying people have taught the former atheist that life does not end with death. They live their last days in happiness and tranquility, and they managed to convey this to Hadley. Now she is not afraid of death and appreciates every moment of her earthly life. It's a gift that her patients gave her. One of her charges, Miss Margaret, confessed after her late husband gave her a tour of that world.
I can't wait to go there forever. I'm ashamed in front of my children, but I miss that life. And I don't regret leaving them at all. It's not forever. Someday we'll all be together again.
Hadley's next story will be about Mr. Albert, who has worked all his life as a chef in the best restaurants in New Orleans. He was not in a hospice. Hadley visited him at home. The patient was indifferent to her visits. There was no way to find common topics for conversation. One day a nurse came in to see him at lunchtime. The patient was enjoying a famous Orleans dish, stewed red beans with rice. Hadley recalled that she had recently tried to make this dish at home, but the family refused to eat it. The cook was interested and asked her to tell him step by step how the cooking went. He immediately pointed out the gross mistakes and promised that someday he would teach her the right recipe. This is how the communication between the nurse and the patient began. One day, Mr. Albert's wife called Hadley and asked her to come over immediately. The fact is that he got out of bed for the first time in a year and is now cooking a specialty dish in the kitchen while talking to his late mother. His wife was very worried about what was happening, but Hadley, as a professional nurse, understood that the patient had terminal enlightenment, which was manifested by increased activity, a surge of energy, and a good mood. After that, death is likely to occur within 24 hours. When the nurse arrived, she found the patient in the kitchen. He cheerfully said, "You're just lucky. Now you will get a lesson from a real master. My mom is here, and she knows how to cook this dish better than anyone in the world." While Hadley was chopping vegetables under Mr. Albert's guidance, she witnessed his conversation with his mother. He was happy. When the dish was ready, the nurse escorted the patient to bed. He died a couple of hours later. And here's an amazing story worthy of a movie. Romance on the deathbed. The patient was not yet 40 years old, but she was dying of cancer. One morning, she told the nurse that she seemed to be losing her mind. And when Hadley asked her why she thought that, the patient replied that she had a dream.
The guy I went to college with was standing by my bed all night. We had a great romance, but before graduation we quarreled and broke up. The last time I saw him was at a farewell party. I went to the other side of the country and never heard from him again.
Hadley suggested searching the internet for information. They did so and found his obituary. He died 2 years ago. Hadley is sure that they are together now. At the beginning of her work at the hospice, Hadley thought that such visions were extremely rare and only happened to deeply religious people. But after talking to colleagues, she realized that this was not the case. It doesn't matter where the patient comes from, how they were raised, or what they believe in. This happens to people of different races, ages, and faiths. And that's fine. Hadley is sure that the afterlife exists, and our loved ones are waiting for us there. Those who are on the verge of death acquire special knowledge. Hadley often thinks of his patient Elizabeth. She was only 35 years old. She was a follower of a healthy lifestyle and had never smoked, but she was dying of lung cancer. Oncologists could not name the cause of her illness. Despite the terrible diagnosis, she was kind and open to communication. One day, she said thoughtfully,
"Don't be like me. I was too worried about my figure, and I think I spent too much time on the treadmill. It was necessary to communicate more with friends and enjoy delicious food. It would give me more joy than a flat stomach."
Working in a hospice taught Hadley to enjoy small pleasures, and her favorite motto was, "Let's worry about making life a joy. It's better than waiting longingly for death." Finally, I want to tell you a creepy story. All hospice workers believe that leaving is easier if your conscience is clear. Here is one example illustrating this idea. The man was dying of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. He did not want to come to terms with his fate and was constantly in a state of anxiety. No amount of medication helped him calm down. His condition was deteriorating dangerously. Hadley contacted his doctor, but he suggested inviting a priest. This patient was a staunch atheist, but when a priest appeared, he agreed to listen to prayer. After that, the chaplain asked, "Sir, do you have unfinished business on this earth?" The patient replied that he did not understand what he was talking about. The chaplain left, but Hadley remained on duty. After a couple of hours of silence, the patient said that he urgently needed to call his daughter. The nurse handed him the phone. The man dialed the number, apologized for everything he had done, and was forgiven. He died in the morning in complete peace, refusing to take sedatives. In conclusion, I would like to quote from Hadley Vlahos' book. I am grateful for the opportunity to be the last nurse in a person's life. It's really a privilege and a great honor for me. I always see myself as an intermediary helping people move on to the next world. I usually thank them for allowing me to be by their side until the end. In fact, I would like to convey to people that each of us sooner or later will face death. It is important not to avoid this topic. When your loved one is living his last days, respect his wishes and do everything to make his departure as calm and beautiful as possible. Every day is worth enjoying life. I feel like there is something beyond the threshold of death, but I do not know what it is called. What happens next cannot be explained by the language and knowledge that we have here on Earth. Write in the comments, what do you think about all this? How do you feel about what Hadley Vlahos does and what he tells us? Dear friends, if you liked my video, then please like it. In addition, I recommend watching my other videos. For example, about another hospice nurse, Julie McFadden. She talks about the truly incredible things that happen to her patients. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.